Um, I know that, and and you and I talked about this briefly, and I know that no two people heal through the same exact path. However, I would love for you to talk about some of the modalities that you've used to kind of heal your body, your spirit, your mind. What are some like personal things that you've done yourself?
Well, first you got to understand that when you're healing from trauma, it's multi-layer. You've got so many different avenues of pain and trauma, the way it's stored in the body, the memory, the actual experiences. It's a spiritual wound. The energetics of such a wound also gets stored in the body. So there's so many layers, and with that, I took a multi-modality approach. The first thing I did get into was some individual therapy. Eventually, I did some group therapy. I've done all kinds of energy work. And hold on, I wrote it down so I'd remember. So there was, I've done coaching to address specific issues. I've done nutrition and supplements. So many people have no idea how eating junk and all of that actually gets in the way of your healing your trauma, because it actually reinforces a lot of the ups and downs and the moods and stuff that you don't want to have. So I was fortunately always very petite and very concerned about being petite. So I
Yes.
didn't eat a lot of junk, and I've studied really hard all the different kinds of natural modalities. In fact, I eventually got a doctorate in natural health. So really
Wow.
about that. I've done spiritual work, and just to clarify that, spiritual work doesn't necessarily mean a particular religion. It can involve religion. For me, it involved all kinds of different approaches. Sometimes there was a church, sometimes it wasn't a church, sometimes it was, again, the spiritual, energetic, it could be Buddhist, it could be, I took from anything that would help make me stronger and move in the right direction.
Makes sense.
There's the issue of forgiveness, and the biggest person to forgive is yourself.
Oh, yes.
So
Yes.
there's been that. And it's really interesting because forgiveness is one of those weird things. A lot of people want to jump right into forgiveness, and they haven't done the work, but they're trying to do the right thing. So I forgive them, but they actually don't forgive them, and they can't really move forward. And I never focused on forgiveness, but I got to the point of where I could say, okay, that person was really sick. It's not okay what they did,
Yeah.
but I get what's going on. And so I had a chaplain friend of mine, and said, well, isn't that what forgiveness is? I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I achieved it. So
Absolutely.
I don't want people, because the other issue is that there are those who jump into it, and there are others who go, there's no way I'm forgiving that bastard for what they did.
Yeah.
And I'm here to say, I'm not here to tell you to. If you get to that place, more power to you, and if you don't, that's okay too. The biggest thing is remembering forgiveness is not really about them. It's always about you. It's about you being free from the experience, from the person, from the situation.
Absolutely.
So there's that aspect of healing. I would say the hardest one, and the one I'm focused on right now, is the whole self-love piece of it. It's more challenging than I'd like to admit, but it's not really something that we talk about in our society. What does that mean? If you hear you think highly of yourself, you're narcissistic, you're self-centered, you're the
Yeah.
and that's not really what self-love is about. Self-love is really, self-care. It's setting your boundaries. It's being assertive. It's feeling good about yourself. It's opening up to love. It's letting love in. It's being able to give love freely and comfortably. It's much bigger than people realize.
Absolutely.
And then the last thing I've done a little bit of work on is the inner child.
Mm.
We think we're one person, but the truth of the matter is there are different people in us all the way through our life. So if you've had a significant experience in your life, that little person is still there. So like it was really interesting when I discovered I'd actually been more than molested. I was in graduate school. And, all the way through elementary school, you hear about molestation. You never hear about rape. And rape is not necessarily this big, mean fight thing.
Yeah.
It's, and I had clearly been raped. And the only reason I know that my memory was real was because in graduate school, I was taking a class on child sexual abuse. And children talk in a certain way about these things based on their understanding.
Okay.
And your memory of that as an adult is in the voice of that child until you know differently. So my memory was of being peed on, but that's not what happened. But my understanding as a child didn't know what ejaculation was. And
Yes.
it was really interesting going to the class, and all of a sudden this light goes off. I'm like, oh my God, that's what happened. That's.
Wow.
And so we've got all these little people in us that until we address them and help them to heal,
Yeah.
um, they keep affecting us one way or another. They affect the way we think, the way we feel, the different experiences, that how we interpret things. And so
Absolutely.
we're able to give them what they need. Now we get to be the adult
Mhm.
caregiver to our inner child. And as we do that, we help that inner child to heal on another level so that we can now integrate that part of ourselves to be more whole, more connected.
Absolutely. That just warms my heart. Even just the way that you just worded that, like, we are now the adult, and we're now in charge. We can't be going around blaming our parents or whoever forever. We can now, take on that responsibility ourselves to care for that. That's so strong. And I've never heard anyone say it that way. So I so appreciate that. Because that gives our power back.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's really the biggest piece of the healing is you're learning to reclaim the power that had unjustly been taken from you. Whether you're an adult who was traumatized or a child who was traumatized, it's really about reconnecting and taking care of and moving forward. You get to choose whether you're going to remain the victim forever or whether you're going to claim the survivor and then learn to live. And that's really where
Absolutely.
people get stuck more often. If they get through the victim, then they get stuck in surviving. But you don't want to survive forever. You want to learn how to live and embrace life and really enjoy what is before you.
Yeah. Cheryl's asking you a question. She says, "What's one way you nurtured your inner child?"
That's really interesting. Because I've actually done more of that work with my clients than I have with myself, because it's always kind of awkward. So I'm learning how to do that. When I worked with my clients, I've had a lot of when we are acting out or reacting to something, oftentimes that's that inner child screaming and yelling for attention. And so what I would have my clients do is pick out a stuffy, go to the store, pick out your favorite little stuffy, whatever feels right. And the goal is to let that stuffy represent your inner child. So then when you need that hug, you pick up that baby and you give that baby a hug.
Oh, I love it.
You love them and you tell them what they need to do. And my clients who were mostly men were going, yeah, right, whatever. And I've got one now goes, I still pick him up every now and then.
Oh, I love that.
So it does. It gives you, because, it's so abstract to have a child in there. You can sit there and you can hug like that yourself, but it doesn't quite feel right. So when you have something representing it and you're
Yeah,
giving all your love to that thing, which is ultimately giving it to yourself, you're learning how to heal that wound that is there.
absolutely.
With the coach that I'm working with right now, she's having me do some having conversations with this child. So when something comes up, I'm sitting here going, I'm so glad you're here. I'm here. You're safe. You're going to be okay. I've got you. The things that I would have wanted to hear as a child,
Yeah.
the things that would have made me feel safe and loved.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Take your power back. Yes, Michelle. Thank you. There was one more question. Cheryl said, I love that. I have just the doll. Yes. Man, when you were saying that, I could feel that. My eyes were totally welling up with tears. Cheryl had a question, or Charlotte had a question earlier. I didn't put it on the screen, but you had mentioned food. She said, food can impact that. I don't remember what you
mhm.
were talking about. All she wants to know, all processed foods. Do all processed foods impact?
It's preferable to minimize all processed food as much as possible. I notice right now I'm not in charge of my diet because I'm living with my family because of this crazy situation with the housing. I sold my home and haven't been able to secure my own one again. So I'm eating their diet, and their diet has is very, very different from mine. They eat tons of processed food. They eat tons of stuff with flour and all of that. When I'm eating myself, I minimize all of that. I try to avoid most canned foods, eat a lot of frozen veggies. I buy as natural meat as I can possibly find. It's a little harder to do that right now with everything going on.
Mm,
And so I keep my diet very simple, and you don't end up having all this other stuff to have to clear out. And what you have to remember is that anything you're taking in with food is just part of what you're taking in, because your water, your air, everything is filled with all kinds of stuff, and your body has to process all that. So the
exactly.
less we're putting into there and the more natural and easier it is for our system to digest the food, the better.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. I agree with that.